Every spring, we spend millions on blue fertilizer, convinced plants can't survive without it. But for 450 million years, long before synthetic chemicals, plants thrived by partnering with an invisible fungal network that could boost their biomass by over 60%. For just $2, you could restore a system that Big Egg quietly sidelined, creating nutrient superhighways beneath your feet.
Why did we abandon nature's original internet? And what happens if we bring it back? In 1997, a Canadian forest ecologist named Dr. Suzanne Simard published a paper in Nature that would rattle the foundations of plant science. Her experiment was audacious. She injected radioactive carbon dioxide into the leaves of a young birch tree, then tracked where that carbon went. Days later, she detected the same radioactive signature inside a Douglas fir seedling meters away. There was no direct root contact, no shared air. The only possible pathway was the thin, nearly invisible web of fungal threads connecting the roots below ground carbon. The very currency of life for plants was moving from one tree to another through a living network. Simard's data showed that this transfer was not a one-way street. Birch and fir exchange carbon back and forth depending on the season and their needs. A kind of underground barter system. Larger, older trees, what Simard would later call mother trees, could send resources to shaded seedlings or drought-stressed neighbors. This was not competition. It was cooperation, written into the soil itself. In the language of numbers, as much as 6% of a tree's carbon could pass through these fungal highways, enough to tip the scales for a struggling sapling. At the time, forestry experts and plant ecologists were deeply skeptical. The reigning model treated forests as battlegrounds, where every tree fought for sunlight and nutrients. Simard's findings sounded almost heretical. Colleagues at government agencies and universities questioned her methods, her math, even her motives. Some dismissed the idea of trees talking or sharing as fantasy, not fact. But the evidence kept coming. Other labs began to repeat her radiocarbon experiments, tracing the same flows of nutrients and signals between species. Over time, the Wood Wide Web moved from a fringe idea to a central concept in ecology. Simard's research reshaped how scientists view forests, not as collections of isolated individuals, but as networks bound together by fungal filaments older than roots themselves. Her story is a reminder. Sometimes the most extraordinary truths are the ones hiding right beneath our feet. Beneath every patch of living soil, a silent barter hums along microscopic highways. The word for this partnership is mycorrhizae. The term comes from Greek and means fungus root. Here, plant and fungus strike a deal that has lasted nearly 500 million years. The plant, busy turning sunlight into sugar, offers a steady supply of carbon-rich food. The fungus, in return, sends out high thread-like filaments so fine they can slip through cracks and pores in the soil that plant roots cannot even touch. These high are more than just extensions. They are nature's original mining network, reaching 10, 100, sometimes 1,000 times farther than the plant's own roots. In practical terms, a single seedling with a dusting of mycorrhizal spores can tap into a hidden reservoir of nutrients and water far beyond what its roots alone could ever access. Imagine a carrot or a cornstalk suddenly able to draw from a pantry stretching meters in every direction, one that is always restocked by the fungus. The heart of the exchange is simple: sugar for survival. Plants pump out carbohydrates, a form of currency fungi cannot make for themselves. In return, the fungus delivers phosphorus, nitrogen, and water, essentials for growth, right to the plant's doorstep. This trade is not charity. It is a finely tuned economy, with each partner keeping score. When the plant has plenty of phosphorus, it cuts back its sugar payments, and the fungus scales down its services. But when nutrients run low, the plant increases its offer, and the fungus responds by expanding its network, probing deeper and wider. This system is astonishingly efficient. They are thinner than a human hair, capable of slipping into spaces that even the finest root hairs cannot reach. In doing so, they unlock minerals trapped in rock, scavenge for water in dry spells,
and even fend off soil pathogens. The result is a living web, invisible to the eye, but responsible for much of the world's plant productivity. What makes this partnership so powerful is scale. In a single teaspoon of healthy soil, you might find miles of these fungal threads. For the plant, it is like plugging into a supercharged root system overnight. For the fungus, it is a steady meal ticket paid in sugar. This is why the gains from restoring mycorrhizal networks can seem almost magical.
When the trade is working, plants do not just survive, they thrive,
often with less need for outside help. The reach of these highlands, measured in laboratory and field studies, can multiply a root's effective surface area by up to 1,000 times. That is the secret behind those dramatic growth spurts and yield jumps. It is not a miracle. It is the original soil operating system rebooted.
The next question is whether this ancient alliance can still deliver in the age of chemical shortcuts and synthetic fixes. Peer-reviewed studies have put the old partnership between plants and fungi to the test, and the results are anything but folklore. In 2022, a meta-analysis published, a new photoologist gathered data from nearly 200 independent trials across crops and soils. The average was a 64% increase in plant biomass when mycorrhizal inoculants were used. That is not a single lucky garden or a cherry-picked field, but the mean across controlled experiments from tomatoes to wheat. Another line of evidence comes from a 2023 study in Nature Microbiology, where Swiss researchers ran field trials on maize and wheat. Their findings showed a 40% jump in yield, especially in soils that had been depleted by years of conventional farming. These were not greenhouse pots or tiny test plots. They were working fields managed by real farmers. The largest gains appeared where soils were most worn down, where natural fungal networks had been broken by plowing and synthetic fertilizer. The researchers traced the improvement to a single species of Auerbus mycorrhizal fungus, Rhizoglus irregularis, which reconnected plant roots to a wider nutrient pool. In fields with high levels of pathogenic fungi, the benefits were even more dramatic, with the inoculant acting as both a nutrient delivery system and a shield against disease. The story repeats in cotton. A peer-reviewed trial published in Nature's Scientific Reports tracked yield gains after mycorrhizal inoculation in large-scale cotton fields. The number was a 28.54% increase in harvest weight, with less need for chemical fertilizer. These gains are not outliers. They are documented, replicable, and grounded in the numbers. Each of these studies lists exact protocols: soil phosphorus tested before planting, control and treatment plots side by side, yields measured and weighed at the end of the season. The data is there, open for anyone to check. The most sensational claims, 8 times faster growth or quadrupled fruit harvests, trace back to edge cases. For example, one Finnish study combined wood ash and urine with mycorrhizal fungi, producing a 4.2 times increase in tomato fruit. Another trial, with biochar as a microbial habitat, pushed tomato yields up by nearly 300%. But these are the exceptions, not the rule. The consistent, peer-reviewed science points to yield and biomass gains in the 28 to 64% range. Remarkable, but not miraculous. These numbers are not marketing copy. They come stamped with the names of journals and the weight of statistical review. They are the reason why the old fungal partnership is being reconsidered by everyone from backyard gardeners to commercial growers. The promise is clear: restore the network and the soil begins to work for you again. The next question is why, if the evidence is this solid, the system was ever lost in the first place. High phosphorus fertilizer promised a shortcut to bigger harvests, but it came with an invisible cost. When synthetic phosphorus floods the soil, the plant's ancient deal with its fungal partner begins to unravel. Plants, sensing an abundance of easy-access nutrients, hold back on their side of the bargain. Instead of sending sugar down to feed the fungus, the plant reroutes energy into its own immediate growth. The fungus, cut off from its only food supply, starts to shrink back. In field after field, this pattern repeats. Researchers at NC State University call it
the fast food effect. Isotope tracing studies using labeled carbon show that in phosphorus-rich soils, plants reduce their sugar exports to fungal higher up to 70%. The fungal network, once stretching meters beyond the root zone, collapses into a fraction of its former size. Fungi cannot survive without carbon from their host. Within weeks of a high-phosphorus fertilizer application, high-fall growth drops by more than half, and colonization rates plummet. The consequences do not stop there. With the fungal miners gone, plants lose access to hidden reserves of phosphorus, nitrogen, and water that only the high could reach. Yields may hold steady for a season or two, but soon the soil's natural supply cannot keep up. The solution, according to the fertilizer industry, is simple: add more fertilizer. But every dose of synthetic phosphorus makes the soil less hospitable to fungi, and the cycle tightens. Growers find themselves locked into a treadmill, each year requiring more input for the same or even diminishing returns. A skeptical agronomist flipping through decades of soil test data points to the numbers. Fields that once thrived on compost and crop rotation now demand triple the fertilizer to maintain yields. He calls it an economic shutdown. You are not just feeding the crop, he says, you are feeding the addiction. This is not the story of a single bad harvest or a failed experiment. It is a feedback loop built into the chemistry of modern agriculture. High phosphorus triggers plants to cut off their fungal partners. The fungi die back, the natural nutrient web collapses, and the farmer is left with no choice but to buy more synthetic inputs. Over time, the soil loses its resilience, and the cost of farming rises. Restoring the fungal network is not as simple as sprinkling spores on the ground. If the soil is still loaded with phosphorus, the partnership cannot restart. The rules for bringing the system back to life are strict, a fact that has tripped up even experienced growers. The promise of the $2 solution only holds if the feedback loop is broken first. Until then, the synthetic treadmill keeps rolling, powered by a cycle that quietly buries the very system it replaced. A $2 packet of mycorrhizal inoculant can treat an entire backyard garden for the season if you use it the right way. The math is simple: 1 gram per plant, about 7 cents each. But there is a catch that trips up even experienced growers. Mycorrhizal fungi only colonize roots when soil phosphorus stays below 70 parts per million. If you have been dumping 10-10 fertilizer, those spores will not stand a chance. The partnership shuts down before it even starts. Application is all about timing and placement. The powder must touch living roots or seeds, never just scattered on the soil surface. Sunlight kills the spores in minutes, and dry dust does nothing for plants already in the ground. The best results come from dusting the roots of transplants or coating seeds before planting. Once in contact, colonization begins within 5 to 16 days, but the real network takes shape over months. That is when the underground trade routes open up and plants tap into nutrients far beyond their own roots. Not every crop will benefit. Brassicas like broccoli, cabbage, and kale do not form mycorrhizal partnerships, and beets do not either. For those crops, skip the inoculant and save your money. For everything else, a single dusting can last for years, as long as you keep phosphorus in check and avoid chemical shortcuts. This is the frugal grower's move, a one-time investment for a lifetime of stronger, more resilient plants. For gardeners and small farmers, the idea of restoring the ancient fungal partnership is not locked behind patents or regulatory red tape. Mycorrhizal inoculants are widely available, often OMAR listed for organic use, and they pose zero toxicity risk to humans or animals. There is no blanket ban, only some labeling rules and product registration for large-scale commercial sales. For anyone growing food at home, the solution is both legal and simple. The most affordable route is trap culture, a method championed by the Rhodiola Institute. It starts with a pot of bajaya grass and a scoop of wild soil from a healthy, undisturbed patch, such as an old hedgerow or a forest edge. Over several months, the grass roots become colonized by native mycorrhizal fungi. When the grass is mature, Its root zone and surrounding soil are teeming with spores and high.
This living inoculum can be mixed into planting holes or dusted onto seeds, jumpstarting the underground network at essentially no cost. The trap culture method turns a small pot into a low-cost factory of beneficial fungi. Commercial producers give the same message. Their inoculant is concentrated biology. No chemicals, no tricks, just what soil ecosystems have always used. Alary listed products like Smart Grower and Micro Applier, sold openly in garden centers and online, typically for under $7 for 100 grams. A single packet treats dozens of plants. For those who want to avoid the store entirely, the do-it-yourself approach is not only allowed, it is encouraged by soil scientists and extension agents. The real barrier is not the law. The real barrier is knowing that the tool exists and that anyone can use it. The so-called ban is a myth. The ancient partnership is ready to be revived, one handful of living soil at a time. Today, global fertilizer demand keeps rising, even as peer-reviewed science shows plants can thrive with far less. Restoring the underground fungal network is not nostalgia. It is a solution proven to boost yields by over 40% while cutting chemical use. As soil health declines worldwide, the real revolution may be invisible. Sometimes progress starts by reviving what industry forgot. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.